The second most visited place in all of America is not Disneyland. It is not Times Square. It is not the Grand Canyon. It is a house, a single house in Memphis, Tennessee, with iron gates, a long white driveway, and a grave in the backyard. That house is Graceland, the home of Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll. More people make their way to this one house every year than to almost anywhere else in the entire country. The only residence that draws more visitors is the White House itself. And right now, that house sits at the center of one of the most heartbreaking stories in American history, because the family who calls it home has been losing everything, one person at a time, one tragedy at a time. And just when the weight of grief felt unbearable, a criminal emerged from the shadows and attempted to take it all away. This is the true story of what happened to Graceland, and it is far more devastating than most people realize. Let us begin with the first wound, the one that set everything in motion. August 16, 1977. Elvis Presley was found unresponsive in his bathroom at Graceland. He was 42 years old. His heart had failed him. Within hours, the entire world knew that the greatest rock and roll singer who had ever lived was gone. But here is something most people overlook when they speak of that day. There was a little girl inside that house. Lisa Marie Presley, 9 years old. Elvis's only child. The one person on earth he cherished more than music, more than fame, more than anything the world had ever offered him. She had grown up within those walls. She had run through those hallways. She had sat beside her father at the piano while he played just for her. She had felt a sense of safety in his presence that nothing else in the world could replicate. And on August 16, 1977, that safety disappeared forever. She would later write in her memoir that she had always carried a fear of losing him. Even as a very young child, she could sense something fragile about her father's hold on life. She wrote that she sometimes found him unconscious, that she watched him with anxious eyes even when she was too small to fully understand what she was witnessing. As a little girl, she once wrote a poem with a single line that shattered everyone who ever read it. "I hope my daddy doesn't die." He died. Now, here is something most people do not know about what became of Graceland after Elvis was gone. The home did not simply lose its owner. It lost its entire identity overnight. By the early 1980s, the estate was facing serious financial strain. Lisa Marie, now a teenager, was watching her father's legacy slowly come under threat, not from enemies, but from the plain, cold reality of what it costs to maintain a 13-acre estate. So in 1982, 5 years after Elvis died, the family made the difficult decision to open Graceland to the public. It was not an easy choice. This was their home, their private sanctuary, the place that carried every memory of the man they had lost. Opening those doors meant allowing strangers to walk through the very rooms where Lisa Marie had grown up, where Elvis had laughed, eaten breakfast, watched television, and lived his real life away from the cameras. But they did it, and what happened next surprised even them. Visitors stood at his grave in the meditation garden and wept. Complete strangers cried together over a man most of them had never met, yet somehow loved as though they had known him their whole lives. Graceland saved itself by opening its doors. And in doing so, it became something far greater than a home. It became the place the world came to grieve, to celebrate, and to remember. The second most visited home in America. The financial crisis was resolved. The legacy was secured. And for a time, it seemed as though Graceland was going to be all right. But the family living within it was about to face something that no ticket sale could ever heal. Lisa Marie received the phone call that destroyed her. Her son, Benjamin Keough, was gone. 27 years old. Elvis's grandson. A young man who bore his grandfather's face so completely that people would stop mid-sentence when they saw photographs of him. The same dark eyes, the same jawline, the same quiet intensity. Gone. People who knew Lisa Marie said she was never the same after that day. That something essential inside her fractured and never fully mended. That the grief of losing a child is the kind that does not heal, it simply gets carried. She carried it for 2.5 years. Then, on January 12, 2023, her own heart gave out. She was 54 years old. She collapsed at her home in California, was rushed to the hospital, and was gone before the day ended. Priscilla Presley, who had already laid Elvis to rest, who had already buried her grandson Benjamin, now had to bury her daughter. The little girl who had grown up inside Graceland, who had ridden horses in that backyard, who had inherited everything and spent her entire life trying to protect it. They brought Lisa Marie home to Graceland. They laid her to rest in the meditation garden, right beside Elvis. Father and daughter, separated for 46 years, together again in the only home either of them had ever truly loved. That garden, which had once held a single grave, now held two. And the silence surrounding them was the kind that makes the very air feel heavy. Graceland had lost its owner, and now it had lost his only child. Riley Keough inherited everything. Lisa Marie's eldest daughter, Elvis's granddaughter, 34 years old and carrying more grief than most people accumulate across an entire lifetime. She inherited the trust that controls Graceland. She inherited the legal responsibilities. She inherited the enormous burden of being the last Presley standing between this iconic home and whatever the future might bring. She was still deep in mourning, still learning how to exist in a world without her mother, still finding her footing in circumstances nobody had ever prepared her for. And that is precisely when the attack came, because that is when someone decided she was vulnerable enough to rob. A notice appeared in a Memphis newspaper in May 2024. It was buried in the legal section, the kind of small print most people scroll past without a second glance. It announced that Graceland was going to be auctioned off. The notice claimed that before her death, Lisa Marie Presley had secretly borrowed $3.8 million from a private lending company, that she had used Graceland itself as collateral, that the loan had gone unpaid, and that the company was now moving to recover its money by selling the property. The auction was set for May 23, 2024. Riley read those words and felt the ground shift beneath her, because her mother had never borrowed that money, had never signed any such agreement, had never once put Graceland up as collateral for anything in her life. Every single word of that notice was a fabrication. Someone had constructed an entirely fictional financial history. They had invented a loan, invented a debt, invented a company to claim it, and then forged Lisa Marie Presley's signature on the paperwork to make it all appear legitimate. They had deliberately waited until Lisa Marie was in the ground, until her family was shattered and exhausted and consumed by grief, and then moved quietly and precisely to steal the most precious thing the Presley family had left. Not with violence, not with noise, but with paper, with ink, with forged signatures on official-looking documents. The quietest and most calculated form of theft imaginable. Riley did not fall apart. She fought. She contacted her lawyers immediately, filed a lawsuit within days, and that lawsuit dismantled the scheme piece by piece. The company behind it, Nosany Investments and Private Lending, did not exist as a legitimate business. It had been invented from nothing, created solely to carry out this fraud. The documents they had filed included what appeared to be a notarized signature from Lisa Marie Presley, complete with an official stamp and seal design to make it look legally binding and real. Investigators tracked down the notary whose name appeared on those documents. That woman told them she had never encountered Lisa Marie Presley in her entire life. Not once. She had never witnessed her sign anything. Her name, her stamp, her entire professional identity had been stolen and placed on fraudulent paperwork without her knowledge or consent. Priscilla Presley took to Instagram, a grandmother in her late 70s, a woman who had outlived her husband, her daughter, and her grandson, who had surrendered more to grief than any person should ever have to endure. She posted a photograph of Graceland on her Instagram page and wrote just 2 words across it in large letters. "It's a scam." That image spread across the internet within hours because something about seeing this woman, after everything she had been through, still standing at those gates and still fighting, struck people in a place that was hard to put into words but impossible to disregard. One day before the auction was scheduled to take place, a judge in Memphis called a hearing. He listened. He examined what had been presented, and he halted the sale entirely. He declared that Graceland is irreplaceable under Tennessee law, that no financial settlement could ever compensate for its permanent loss, that the harm to this family would be irreversible. The auction was blocked. The investigation pressed forward and eventually led to a 54-year-old woman from Missouri named Lisa Findley. She had created the fake company, forged every document, and disguised herself as three entirely different individuals throughout the scheme to make the trail harder to follow. She had launched the entire operation just months after Lisa Marie's death, deliberately targeting a family at their most broken and exposed moment, convinced that grief had left them too weak to push back. She was catastrophically wrong about that. In February 2025, she pleaded guilty. In September 2025, she was sentenced to more than 4 years in federal prison. So this is the true story of what happened to Graceland. It lost Elvis in 1977. It nearly collapsed financially in the years that followed. It rescued itself by opening its doors to the world. It lost Benjamin. It lost Lisa Marie in 2023. It survived a brazen criminal fraud that came within a single day of erasing everything, and it is still standing. Every morning, those iron gates swing open. Thousands of people walk up that long white driveway. They stand in the jungle room. They study the cars. They press their hands to the glass and gaze at the gold records, the jumpsuits, the everyday objects that a man touched with his own hands decades ago. And they stand at that grave in the meditation garden, where Elvis and Lisa Marie lie side by side, and they feel something that is very difficult to name but very easy to recognize. Because some places hold on to the people who love them long after those people are gone. Graceland is that place.